and we will get going. So welcome everybody to our very first virtual pickup party. I'll try to keep track to see in our waiting room if more people join us. But obviously this is weird, awkward times. Would love to have you in the store, taste and try all the wines that we have in this month's wine club, but that's not possible at this particular point in time. So with that, what we've done is we've set up this Zoom meeting. The focus of this is going to be the regular wine club wines. I'm probably going to do a follow-up next Friday with our premium wines, our bubbly wines, and our sweet wines as well. In fact, I'm definitely going to do that. I just couldn't pack in all those wines in 40 minutes. So joining us today, we have John Spina. John is with Wine Connections USA. I met John 3 years ago at a buying conference in Chicago. So there's a lot of these industry trade group meetings that we go to, and it's kind of speed dating with wine. And he had a wonderful portfolio of Italian wines and Spanish wines. And then that relationship kind of went further. I went with him on a trip to Spain, visited a number of wineries there. And in fact, two of the wineries that we've recently had in our wine club, Domaine de la Cartucha / Colgalina, and then Zazo Gaston, were from that portfolio of wineries that I had a chance to visit with when we were in Spain. We have been trying to work on getting me to Italy to visit some of the Italian wines.
It's going to happen this year.
Yeah, we're looking at, I think, even in May at some point in time. But this was one of the wineries that we got introduced to. So welcome, John. Kind of give everybody a little bit of background about who you are, what you do, and why you love your job, I guess.
Sure, no problem. Well, I started out in wine on the retail side of things about 12 years ago now, and kind of worked in various jobs in the industry in retail, import distribution. And now what I do after coming out here to California, I've started working with some mostly boutique wineries in Spain and Italy who have a hard time breaking through. There's so many wineries out there, so many wines, and a lot of these wineries I had met over my career, and the common refrain always was, we want to work in the U.S. We have these great wines. The big guys get a lot of attention. They have a lot of money for advertising. They have a lot of boots on the ground in the U.S., selling wine, going to trade shows, doing all the sorts of things you need to do to introduce good wine to the U.S. And so I started basically working with these more boutique wineries to help them get some traction in the U.S. market. So I'm sort of their sales manager in the U.S. And it's a great thing. I think it's a win-win for everybody because these folks get some traction in the U.S. And of course, for the average consumer, they get to see what they always say they want to see, which is a lot of the stuff that's overseas that doesn't often come kind of from the big guys. It's more boutique, more artisanal. It's the kind of stuff, if you were traveling the back roads of Europe, you would stumble on these kinds of wines. And of course, Jeff, you've introduced a bunch of them already in the wine club. And now with Silvano Rigo's wines, this is a classic example of somebody who you would never see normally, because he's only making about 4,000 cases total. And it just is not big enough for your traditional large import company to bring these wines in. So I'm pretty excited for you all to have these wines. I think it's something, again, if you went to Italy, this is the kind of thing you would stumble across, or someone would recommend to you. You go to a restaurant and someone would say, there's a really cool wine producer right down the road. You should stop and see this guy.
Right.
And exactly the kind of boutique guy that you'll have a chance to taste. And it's great when it gets into the hands of someone like you, Jeff, because oftentimes, as I said, the big companies, the big import companies who we need to bring the wines in, just say the guy's too small. I know the wines are very good, but there's no money for me. So oftentimes the average consumer never gets a chance to try a lot of cool wines. And it's really a dollars and cents thing. It's hard to get boutique stuff here at a rate that makes sense for everybody.
So let's talk about the winery and where it's located. So where are we talking about? Obviously, Italy is a wonderful country. It's got a lot of great regions known for exceptional wine. Where are the wines from? Where is Silvano Rigo located? And kind of give us the background as far as what that region is known for.
Sure. So he's in the region of Italy called the Piedmont, or Piemonte, as they'd say in Italy. So this is the northwest part of Italy. If you folks know where Milan is, up in sort of the northwest, if you land in Milan, it's, I'm guessing, an hour and a half, 2 hours or so from Milan, sort of in that northwest corner of Italy. Piedmont's known for the most famous wines are Barolo and Barbaresco. But they make a whole bunch of other wines that we've heard about or probably have tasted as well, such as Dolcetto, Barbera, Arnase. So there's a lot of wine coming out of there. Just Barolo and Barbaresco would be the two most famous. Everyone still, can you hear me there? There it is.
Yep. We can hear you. I'm learning with all this technology, there's lots of different tools. Greg was like, hey, you can share your screen in our last meeting.
That's fantastic.
Play around with it. So we got a little map here. And actually this dot, I believe, is actually on the winery.
Yeah.
So you'll see obviously the big boot. But we're looking at, obviously if we zoom in even more, I don't know if I can do without changing.
But
too far. Now I'm in the Alps, right?
Yep. And as you might know, Piedmont in Italian means foot of the Alps or foot of the mountains, essentially.
Okay.
And you could see the Alps there on Jeff's map, how you could see they're kind of right before you get to the Alps. And it's a very hilly, rolling green hills kind of region, kind of more continental climate. This is not really Mediterranean Italy. This is not sunshine and tomatoes and olive oil. This is the northern part. Much more akin to wines from, let's say, France or even like, continental Europe. And the region is known for things like truffles and more hearty foods, butter, again, not so much olive oil. A lot of great Michelin restaurants in the region. So it's something that, it's a great food and wine region to visit. It's not just, it's not just a place where if you're going to go there, you just want to drink the wines. You definitely want to research in advance some of the restaurants there. They have a lot of Michelin star restaurants, and there's really nothing better than kind of spend some time there, eat and drink while you're in the region.
Now there's a specific, I believe, let me see if I can get this back in here. I'm doing multitasking. So here's kind of a little breakout of Piedmont and all the different various sub-regions, sub-DOCs,
right.
DOCAs within Greater Piedmont. And I always like to see kind of geographic where we are into ones that, because I think we're in Diano Diablo?
Right. So if you know where Alba is, you see Asti there. That's the most prominent. If you go a little lower, it's sort of, actually, Diano d'Alba, you almost have your pointer on it there.
It's right here. Yep, it's right here. I did a little pre-research to figure out where we were, because it's a tiny little region, and there are these tiny little nuggets of regions that, as you mentioned, there might be, a handful, 5, 6, 7, 8 producers
right.
making wine from that region, and because their production is so low, you almost never see them outside of, either Italy or even Piedmont or sometimes even that town. So to speak. And then the other thing I always like to do is, you got Asti, which is super well known, obviously, but the big boys, Barolo and Barbaresco here. The regions there are two big regions in Piedmont that are known for making probably the some of the most expensive and some of the best and age-worthy wine, not only in Italy but throughout the world. So you have it basically. To the southwest is Barolo. To the northeast of Diano Diablo is Barbaresco. So we're basically nestled in between those two amazing regions that are known. So how does that play into where we're at and Silvano and how their wines compare?
Very interesting. You're exactly right, Jeff. It's exactly sort of right between the Barolo zone and the Barbaresco zone. And as you know, if you're outside of the zone, you cannot make a Barolo or Barbaresco. And Diano d'Alba, where Silvano Rigo is, he's right in the middle of those two zones. And legend has it, he told me that when the Barolo consortium was planning Barolo, the boundaries of Barolo, they asked the village of Diano d'Alba, hey, do you want to come and be part of the Barolo zone? And this is back years ago before Barolo was Barolo, before it became very famous. And at the time, Diano d'Alba was very well known for its Dolcetto, and they worried that they would water down their brand of making great Dolcetto and being known for Dolcetto. And they said, no, the mayor of the town said, we're happy not to be part of the Barolo zone. Looking back, it might not have been the best decision.
Right.
They're very similar to Barolo in their terroir. They're just right outside of the Barolo zone. So Silvano cannot make a Barolo. He's not allowed under the law to make a Barolo. So of course, what happens is his best vineyard sites go to making things like Barbera and Dolcetto. And in fact, he makes a DOCG Dolcetto. As you folks may know, DOC wines are sort of a classification system. And if you are sort of an even more specialized and unique area recognized by the Italian governing body, they can give you a DOCG status. And his Dolcetto is actually DOCG, which is you don't see, there's only, I think, 3 zones in Piedmont where you could have DOCG Dolcetto.
Well, and this region only got that classification, I believe, in 10, 15 years ago. They were DOC, and then they were upgraded to this additional status. So
that's correct.
Let's shift gears and start talking about the wines. We have the 3 wine club wines, but there's additionally there's another 4 add-on wines that we brought in. So a lot of our customers probably don't know because they haven't been in the store to see the complete set. So I want to make our way through, focus mostly on the 3 wine club wines, and then we'll talk a little bit about the additional wines that we brought in. So the first wine is, let's see if I can share this as well. I have it here somewhere. I can't share a... All right, boom, there we go. Multiple options. All right. First wine, so this is the primary white wine for this month. So give us the spiel on this wine. Tell us what's so cool and special about Arnis, and then I see it's also from a sub-region right next door to where we're located.
Yeah, so the Arnis is a native variety of the Piedmont, and Arnis means essentially like little rascal in Piedmont dialect. It's a difficult grape to grow, and that's why it got that nickname. So it's not the most fun grape for a lot of producers to make. Historically, it actually used to be added to Nebbiolo wines to kind of soften them. It's very common in Europe and Italy, especially. They seem to always, historically, they've often added white wine to some red wines to soften them a little bit. Of course, they don't do that anymore. It's not allowed anymore, but it does make a nice monovarietal wine. It tends to be kind of a lot of pear flavor in the wine, it's not as citrusy as you'll often find in some white wines. It's definitely going to be more like apple and pear and apricot.
Yep.
As I said, it's kind of a difficult grape to grow. It's not a lot of fun, but it does make a nice white wine of Piedmont. And it has a basic Langhe DOC. And Langhe is sort of the larger region of the Piedmont that is sort of a catch-all. And maybe that's a simple way to think of it. As you might know, there's it's sort of like Chianti. There's a Chianti area, and then there's a Chianti Classico area, which is a much more defined area.
Yep.
And Langhe is a larger area in the Piedmont, and then within the Langhe, of course, you have Barolo and Barbaresco and other types of subregions. But this just has a general Langhe classification. But for all intents and purposes, that doesn't mean much in this case. It's really just about the grape itself, Arnis being a very unique grape to Piedmont. You will see Arnis sometimes. I think some folks out here in California have actually started planting some. But really, to get the true expression of the grape, it really only does well in the Piedmont, in my opinion.
I've seen a little bit. I know like Jacuzzi, obviously given their Italian background and heritage, they make an Arnis. And then another one that we've had in the store that is amazing, I would say amazing version of it. You can tell it's not Italian, but it's Ponzi Vineyards out of Oregon. Makes a really good Arnis as well. And so, like you said, it's a great, unique grape. It has some of the characteristics and body and weight of a Chardonnay, but it doesn't have the same flavor profile. For me, that pear and that stone fruit really kind of jumps off the palate. And when I went, I was having one of our other wines we'll talk about first. I jumped from that wine to this one. It was almost like it felt like there was a little bit of residual sugar in it. But I just think it's the flavor expression in the wine is so concentrated. It really just threw me off a little bit. So.
Yeah. And I should say this wine is not oaked at all. He does not, with his white wines, he doesn't use any oak in the wines.
Absolutely. All right. So one thing, if anybody has any questions as we're going through here, you guys are on mute. Just unmute yourself, jump in, shoot us a question.
We're happy to answer questions. Oftentimes, that's kind of the best way, I think, is if you all can shoot out some questions. I'm happy to talk about different aspects of what interests you.
Does anybody else have the Arnis open and drinking it? Maybe show us your glass, give us a virtual cheers, so to speak. There's my little green screen. It's kind of screwing me up. I can't virtually cheers you. I know Teresa's definitely got a white wine in there because she's our house white wine and rosé expert. So she's going to be happy with this one. So, all right, let's switch gears. Let's jump to our next wine, and I'm going to go to. It is going to be the Dolcetto. I got all of them on here, so I think it's going to be, of course, the last one probably. All right, so so the region obviously. This is their claim to fame. I mean, Dolcetto is a grape that we've had in our club before. We've had some Italian Dolcettos and some other ones, but definitely an interesting grape, very flavorful, very fruit forward. So talk to us about this Dolcetto and what it means to the winery to be making this and have the heritage behind the region and have this grape be kind of, even though it's not our primary red, the Barbera is. It's definitely, I would say, one of the marquee wines in the group.
Yeah, and I can understand why it's not your primary red, Jeff, because in the Piedmont, Dolcetto tends to be sort of the first wine of the Piedmont in terms of what you might have with appetizers or an antipasto platter or something like that. And then you kind of move into Barbera often for the main course. It's a heavier wine. It's a kind of a fuller wine, darker wine. You could say more serious wine in a way, but that's subjective, of course. So Dolcetto often is sort of the first wine that will be served. Dolcetto means little sweet one in Italian. It's not sweet, and it's, in fact, usually has a nice tartness to it. It really kind of makes your mouth water, and I think that's one of the good reasons why it does so well with appetizers and antipasto platters and things like that. It really kind of gets the palate going. You'll notice that nice sort of, I always get sort of a cranberry, like a bitter cranberry kind of note in the wine, and good fruit. It's very easy to drink. It's not super high in acid, and it's usually just tangy and easy to drink, usually fairly low in alcohol as compared to a lot of other types of wines, certainly as compared to Barolo and Barbaresco in the region. I do have a question here logistically. So, sure. And this is for me learning this platform. As I'm sharing the screen, you can see this? Can you see yourself talking in the Yeah.
Okay. And then if I switch the view, does that change anything?
I'm still looking at your text sheet.
And then whoever's talking.
And I see it. Yeah, everyone's lined up on the right side of the screen.
Okay. I got it. I'm just making sure. So it's one of those things I'm learning as I go with all the different functionalities. So what would be the classical pairing for a Dolcetto? You said it's kind of the starter wine. But what would be the classical pairing if I was to sit down with Silvano and the family and have something with their Dolcetto? What would be served?
Yeah, I think meats and cheeses. It definitely would be something that if you went to the winery when you're going through a tasting, they'll bring out meats and cheeses, and they'll have those meats and cheeses for all of the wines that they're pouring for you. The Barbera, the Nebbiolo. The Arnis, all the wines will have those same meats and cheeses there. What I think you'll notice is the Dolcetto works the best with those wines, with those foods. So you'll see that pairing. It cuts through the fat of the meats and cheeses. It's sort of just a nice complement to that. Serve it a little bit chilled, especially in the summertime. Just put on, not cold, not like white wine, but throw it in the refrigerator for 20 minutes or so. And really is bright and juicy. You certainly can do it with things like some of the lighter chicken dishes and things in the Piedmont. But in terms of what Piedmont's more famous for, it's usually richer dishes, risottos, and heavier dishes, and truffles and things. And to be honest, they really wouldn't use the Dolcetto for that kind of food. They'll, again, have it sort of at the beginning of the meal with some things leading up to that, and then they'll switch to a Barbera or a Nebbiolo-based wine.
It's it's food friendly compared with lots of things, but it's not going to overpower them. I mean, in the wine world, we talk about when we're tasting wine, especially we're tasting them blind, on the scale of tannins and acidity and fruit, it's sort of that medium minus, there's nothing that's going to overpower anything. But it goes very well with all those dishes. And sort of you talking about those meat and cheese trays reminded me of hey, we're going to have lunch with this winery in Spain. And it was like a 5-hour lunch. Yeah. And then the next day, it's like, we're just going to have lunch. And we kept asking, okay, is this really just a snack lunch? Is this going to be like another, 18-course meal type event?
Right.
Definitely would go great with charcuterie, some local charcuterie and the local cheese fair. So,
and it's a classic sort of picnic wine of the region too, in terms of throw it in your backpack. And no matter what you're doing on your picnic, if you're just going to eat sandwiches or you eat fried chicken or whatever kind of food you're going to have like that, this is the kind of wine you want to open up outside somewhere in a park or in a nice setting, and it'll be the perfect wine.
Yeah, I mean it's a warm weather red wine too. I mean, you think about it, it's like if it's 90 to 100 degrees out and you want to sit in your porch, you're not going to have Prisoner, right?
Right.
It's because it's just going to be, oh my Lord, it's too much. It's got enough in there that's going to give you that weight and tannin, but it's not going to kill you. So, all right, let's go to our last of our primary wine club wines, which is the Barbera, the regular Barbera. So, All right, so this is the primary red for the month. As John mentioned, for multiple reasons, the Dolcetto wasn't the primary, not because it's not as good, it's just sort of fits on the palate a little bit different. We always kind of like the primary red to be a little bit more punch to it. And so this is definitely that next tier of wine from Silvano. So talk us through this wine a little bit.
Sure. So the Barbera is a grape that's a little darker, a little bigger in style. If you had them side by side, you can definitely see the difference in the color of the wine, the weight of the wine, the texture. Barbera is really good for food as well, though. It's a very high acid wine and a low tannin wine, so it's very juicy. And again, I would recommend on this guy too to give it a little chill in the warmer weather. Both the Dolcetto and the Barbera at the entry level here are unoaked. Part of the package also, as Jeff was mentioning, was the Superiore, the Barbera Superiore, and the Nebbiolo. Those have oak on it. Those are bigger wines. But for the Barbera and the Dolcetto, without the oak on them, you can definitely give them a little chill in the summertime. And I think you'll see it'll drink fresher. It'll drink kind of more lively. But it's a bigger wine. It's a darker wine. It's a heavier wine. And this would be the wine that after you move on from the Dolcetto, the next course, the main course, you can break out the Barbera. It's a very versatile wine. Oftentimes, given that it's a high acid wine, it goes really, really well with tomato-based dishes. So I know, people always talk about Chianti going really well with spaghetti or things like that. But I often think that Barbera is even a better match because it is juicy, it has low tannin and high acid, and I just think it's such a great food wine.
So obviously it's got a great fruit flavor to it, but there's a little bit of, it feels like there's oak on it. It feels like there's a little bit of hint of spice or something on the background, almost like cinnamon or allspice or something like that, which traditionally will come from oak treatment. Right. Is that a characteristic of the grape, or is it more the grape grown in this region?
Yeah, I think in general, to me, Barbera does often have some earthy notes to it. Mm-hmm. And I think in Biano d'Alba in Silvano's area, you often sort of get these sort of secondary characteristics. Like you said, maybe some cinnamon and spice kind of notes. The soil types are very sort of calcareous and marl, that sort of limestone and chalk that you can kind of break up. And that, I think, adds a lot of minerality and interest to all his wines. So it's not just sort of those primary flavors. You don't just get the fruit on the Dolcetto or just get the fruit on the Barbera. You often get sort of, as you said, some secondary notes and things that I think add interest to the wine.
Yeah, and I've had some Barberas from different regions, including within, greater sort of just a general classification Barbera from Italy, and they don't have all those nuances this one seems to have. I mean, you get the fruit definitely comes out right away, huge acidity, right? When you pop it in your mouth, it's just there's that mouth-watering sense from the acidity, but then that it finishes with sort of almost a cinnamony or I want to say almost like a burnt cinnamon, not in a bad way burnt cinnamon, but it's got that weight to it, which is super, super nice. Pairings, obviously, we talked about with Dolcetto, with traditional meat and cheese trays, but like you said, this tomato sauces and the full complement of Italian dishes onto whichever, right?
Yeah, this is really versatile. It can go everything. Again, this could be your picnic wine too, because it can take a chill. It does go terrific with a lot of different foods, given that it's high acid. It makes it very food friendly. So the Barbera certainly can be at that level, but definitely this can be a much more serious wine for you too. And you could have it as your, everything from chicken to pork to red meat with this as well.
One of the things I love about, I love all Italian wines for various reasons. In fact, I love all wine for various reasons. But, there's different parts of Italy that have different characteristics that sometimes throw the American palate off. People are like, oh, I don't like Chianti because it's so dry and it's so tannic. The good thing about a lot of the wines that we've had so far and that we're talking about is the fruit expression in them is so dominant, right? There's just good acidity, good fruit, and kind of what we expect, from an Americanized palate, I would say. So, do you see that a little bit more with wines from this region as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general, it's the classic story of Europeans tend to make wines that are meant to complement food and certainly not overpower food.
Right.
And they'll always sort of go for that marriage of food and wine. And when they're conceptualizing how they want to make wine and what they want to drink, it's with that in mind, rather than making something that's flamboyant and can stand on its own, because it's just not what they do in terms of how they drink. And oftentimes, it's kind of it could be a handicap in a way, because certainly over the years, there have been some, wine critics who don't always appreciate that. If you think about how a wine critic judges wines, they often judge it by sort of standalone on its own, and just based on the flavors that it gives, and not really as using the wine as most people would, is with a meal. So I think Italian wines in general have suffered from that, but I do think also as Americans drink more wines, and Italian wines are very popular in the U.S. Customers are sort of understanding now that there's a difference between a wine that's very flamboyant and might get high scores from a critic versus wine that is something you actually want to drink, with your meal, and drink it, kind of on a more in a more realistic way, let's say.
Right. And we could chat, and I think I've had this conversation with most of the folks that are on with us, because these are some of our regulars that come to all my classes, and they hear me sometimes preach about scores and why they're good or bad, but the whole parkerization of wines and I would say building wines to chase a score, right? And so you certainly aren't going to see that with a lot of Italian wines. And I would say with a producer of this size and a level of authenticity to where they're from and their heritage, you're absolutely not going to see it. They're making wines that are meant to fit a certain profile, regardless of whether a rating agency or a rating person or a wine spectator or whoever tastes it and likes it. That's not their concern, right?
That's right. And one of the great compliments for Silvano Rigo that I got was a Barolo producer said to me that she loved, and she was actually talking about the Barbera. She actually loved this Barbera so much because it's so true to Piedmont. This is what Barbera was when she was growing up, what everyone drank, and before a time when Barbera, and there's still a lot of good traditional Barbera out there, but there is, as you said, there's some that has become a little more commercial and meant more for the international market, maybe with some more oak and some more bells and whistles, bigger fruit, let's say. But she loved this Barbera because it was so traditional and so authentic to what Piedmont always has been.
I'm going to put somebody on the spot here. Kent, you got the Barbera in your glass? Kent? He can't. I'm trying to unmute him. I think he's trying to unmute himself at the same time. It looked like he had a red wine in the glass. I was trying to see if Kent and Joni have the Barbera in their glass.
Heck yeah.
There you go. What do we think? Do we like the Barbera?
Yep.
Very much.
Really good.
Absolutely. We're missing a couple people, but I think with our friends Italian cooking, this would go quite well. So you're gonna have this with our next wine dinner, and I'll bring some other things as well. So
we'll have to buy another bottle though, right?
Well, there's a few here that you might have to look into. So let's jump into the next wine. So we're gonna jump back to some whites. So if you've been in the store to pick up your wines, you've probably seen there's some additional wines to go along with this set from Silvano. The next wine we're going to talk about is going to be the Chardonnay. So obviously Chardonnay is an international grape varietal, but it's home. Its home is in Burgundy. But in reality, there's been historically quite a bit of Chardonnay that has been planted in and throughout Italy for some time. It's just not considered to be a true authentic Italian grape. As a result, sometimes it kind of falls by the wayside, especially when we're trying to put together a set. Now, I'm not saying, hey, it should fall by the wayside because it's not any good. It's a wonderfully delicious wine. I love Italian Chardonnay for a lot of different reasons. But when we do our wine club, we try to find 3 grapes that are more telling of the true story. And our niece definitely does that much better than Chardonnay. But Chardonnay this is their 100% Chardonnay. Also from the Langhe region, which is one of the greater regions, so the concentric circles when we talk about regions, where it's Piedmont, Langhe is one of the larger one that encompasses all of these other regions that it may not qualify. So talk us through the Chardonnay real quick, and then we'll jump through these last 4 pretty quickly.
Sure. As Jeff said, Chardonnay it's not the first thing folks think about when they think about Piedmont wines or Piedmont white wines. But it has been growing a long time in the region, and I think they actually do a very good job because a lot of the Piedmont terroir and sort of the microclimates in Piedmont are certainly more continental, more cool climate, and Chardonnay does very well in cooler climates. This Chardonnay is unoaked. I think if you've tasted it, you would notice that right away. This is really about freshness, about drinkability. It's meant to be a light, fresh wine. This is not meant to be a Chardonnay you would lay down and age like some good Burgundy. This is something you definitely drink fresh and young and just kind of enjoy it for the flavor of the grape. We kind of joke sometimes out here in Sonoma when we taste the Chardonnay that's not heavily oaked. And we say, that's what Chardonnay tastes like. Because oftentimes what we always taste is a lot of the oak components of Chardonnay when it's heavily oaked. So to me, it's very nice to have a Chardonnay where you can just taste the grape, enjoy the wine for what it is. It's a simple wine, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's a wine that you're supposed to drink young and fresh and drink it in season, let's say, and next year, buy the next vintage and drink that.
Very similar, I guess. I wouldn't say Chablis-esque because it doesn't have the huge crispness and acidity that Chablis and the minerality Chablis has, but you can definitely, to your point, we've done these many classes where we have different Chardonnays, and you have the butter people, the sort of the Rombauer fans, and then you have the I don't like Chardonnay, but you pour them something like this or a Chablis, or sometimes in some other regions that don't oak, and they're like, oh, wow, this is quite good. What is this? And you tell them it's Chardonnay, and they swear to God it's not.
Yeah.
But once they get through that initial shock, they're like, oh, I see this. I see how it is. Now, the great thing with this, and I wish we could be doing it, and hopefully somebody can do it at home, is taste the Arnis and this side by side.
Yeah.
You can see both of them have the apple and the stone fruit in them, but the Arnis, that pear, really pops, and there's a little bit more greenness and freshness in that, whereas the Chardonnay tends to be a little bit more on that very green apple-ish profile, with some good minerality as well. You talked about the soil from this region. It's got a lot of things going on that are similar to some of the other great Chardonnay regions in the world. So, all right, so let's move to this one, and this one I know people have had. We're going to talk about the Intrigo. So Intrigo, we did a rosé class. We did a rosé class virtual spotlight not that long ago, and this was one of the wines we actually used for our rosé class. And so this is a rosé. Rosato, of Nebbiolo. So first tell me the difference between a Rosato and a Rosé, and then let's talk about why it's significantly important that this is a Rosato of Nebbiolo.
Sure. Yeah, and that's just rosé. Rosato would be rosé in Italian. They call their rosé wines Rosato, and that's Silvano's English and Italian on his website. I think that in terms of his tech sheet, but it's just a rosé. Nebbiolo is the grape, and Nebbiolo generally, as you may know, as we've talked a little bit about, is the grape of Barolo and Barbaresco. So most people save Nebbiolo grapes for making those wines. But again, Silvano cannot by law make Barolo or Barbaresco, so he wants to do something else. He has, in a sense, he's not fortunate enough to have Barolo or Barbaresco zones because you can make much more famous and expensive wines from those regions. But he is unshackled from the requirements of those regions too. So he could do fun things like make a rosé. You'll notice that the rosé cannot be like Rosé d'Alba or Nebbiolo d'Alba or something like that. It has to be considered table wine in Italy. So it's a very low designation of wine. That's just because the area that he works in does not recognize rosé from Nebbiolo. So, unfortunately, it has to be considered table wine. But I always say that you should never let that dissuade you from trying a wine. Italians often do that, and other countries often do that for a variety of reasons. If they want to play outside of the requirements of their area, they have to declassify their wines. And oftentimes you could find some really, really excellent wines that are technically not supposed to be made in the region.
Super Tuscans, right? I mean, that's the easiest comparison. For a long time, there was no official designation of Super Tuscans, which were probably the most expensive wine, still are the most expensive wines coming out of Italy. And they were, at that point in time, considered Italian table wine. So, I mean, it's wine of Italy, I think, is the Vino is not that, but it's, it's not, there's no specific designation of the wine as far as region goes. But it's a wonderful, I mean, it threw me for a loop when we tasted this in the rosé tasting, because everybody gets their palate ready for either that traditional Provence or Tavel style of southern France, or maybe some Americanized version of rosé of Pinot Noir or a Sancerre Pinot Noir. And this packs a punch for a rosé, man. I mean, it is a rosé for a red wine drinker.
Yeah, absolutely. That's Nebbiolo. That's the grape. It just makes a powerful wine. You could even see the color of the wine. It's a darker color. There's going to be more tannin in this style of rosé. It is, Jeff, you put it well, it's rosé for a red wine drinker. So in the summertime,
is this Saignée or is it direct press? Does he go out and is he intentionally making this, or is he using?
Yeah, something intentional.
Yeah, and so we've talked about this before too. Obviously, there's multiple ways of making rosé. The two primary ones are direct press, where you're taking a grape, a little bit of skin, push it off the skin, and then trying to figure out why this popped up. Trying to push it off the skins, get a little color, but then obviously the other way is you're making a red wine, you want to hyper concentrate it, you bleed off some of the juice, you end up with a byproduct wine. Now byproduct sometimes is a bad word because some of the best rosés out there are done via that method. But the fact that he set out to make a Nebbiolo rosé is pretty cool. And there's not a lot of these out there at all, I would venture to guess.
That's correct.
All right, so we got 2 more wines and we got about 10 minutes. So let's push through these real quick. Next one, I believe, is going to be the Barbera Superior. So this is the wine that I had many choices tonight for dinner. Came home, the wife was making pork chops. And so I decided on this one. So this is the Barbera Superior. So it's the same grape as the Primary Wine Club wine. And I guess we should talk about the price of the previous ones. The Chardonnay is $19.99. The Rosé is $24.99. The one we're talking about, the Barbera Superior, is $29.99. So let's talk about this and how it is different, or I would say an upgraded version of the regular Barbera.
Sure. So what Silvano will do for the Superior is he will take his best grapes of Barbera and designate them. And usually for him, that's going to be the best vineyard sites that he has. So year in and year out, he kind of knows where the grapes come from that he wants to make the Superior. And he will take that and he will designate those separately. So they're going to see a different type of treatment than the first Barbera. They're going to spend a little bit of time in oak, usually about 4 months or so. Up to about a year or so in oak. The minimum requirement is 4 months. He usually goes much above that.
That was going to be my question. Is I thought it was 4 months, but he's doing 10 to 12, right?
Yeah, he's doing 10 to 12. The minimum for a Superior is 4, but he does it much longer. And then and the oak is he uses 2 different types of oak. He uses the sort of the very, very large, what they call botti, the big barrels you might have seen in some of the old rooms. And then he also uses barriques, which are the small traditional French oak barriques. So he uses a combination. So he doesn't want to have the wine be too oaky or too much influence. He wants a little bit of that. It's a much more serious wine. It's a wine that's meant for aging, usually about 5 to 7 years on this wine. So he wants the oak to sort of be an accent to the wine, but never the primary flavor. He always says he never wants you to sort of taste oak as the primary flavor. He still wants the Barbera character to come through.
Right.
So 10 to 12 months for him, and using different size oak barrels seems to work well for him on this. And this is always released sort of 2 years after the vintage. So, he'll harvest this in September, October, depending on the year, and then it won't see the commercial. It won't be released to the public until 2 years later in the springtime.
Now, I think early on you mentioned his total production is around 4,000 cases?
About 4,000, yeah.
And how many acres or hectares does he have?
He has 10.
So 10 hectares or acres?
10 hectares.
Okay, so that's 2.2 acres or 2.1? I can never remember the math.
I think it's about 2 to 1, right? It's
like 2.1 or 2.18 or something like that. So he's got about 20. So not a huge production. What of this wine? Obviously 4,000 across his entire spectrum of wines. How much do you know how much of this wine he makes every year?
I think this is about 500. No, it's about 400 cases. I think maybe 300 to 400 cases. So tiny production.
Yeah, and not a lot. Certainly not a lot of it. I mean, I think we were the first people to bring all these wines to the United States.
That's correct. I'm sorry. There's a little bit in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But more, you have more states certainly, and maybe
we're spread out.
Other wines, yeah.
So awesome. I mean, this is definitely you can feel and taste. I mean, just even on the palate, the structure difference between the 2 wines. I remember looking back at my notes when we did these originally, tasting them. Both classic Barbera from Piedmont, both wonderful wines, but just the thing that jumped out to me was the weight on the palate, how this one was immensely more. and almost has that velveteen structure, an integration between the fruit, the spice that I got in the first one. I think the spice was still there, but because of the oak treatment, it better integrated that natural Barbera spice into the wine, which was quite amazing. So there's not a lot of this period that we brought in, and we don't have a lot of it in the Corville store. So I would encourage you to reach out to me if you're interested in this wine. Like I said, this one's $29.99. Last wine we're going to chat about real quick here is going to be our Nebbiolo. Nebbiolo is one of my favorite grapes because I got the chance to do a blind tasting with Doug Frost. Doug Frost is one of the guys that we use as a consultant for us and help us pick our wines. He's one of 4 or 5 people in the world that has both his master sommelier and he is a master of wine. Which are two immensely hard things to pass. People compare passing, I think, the master somm to, harder, 10 times harder than like your bar exam or something like that. I mean, it's quite difficult to pass, and he's an amazing guy. But I got to blind taste the Nebbiolo with him, me and a few other people in a class, and we were lucky enough to get it right. But Nebbiolo was the grape. So talk to us about this wine. Talk to us about Nebbiolo, why it is important to the Piedmont.
Nebbiolo is definitely considered the king of Piedmont grapes. Wasn't always that way. In a sense, Barbera used to have a lot more. And to this day, Barbera still is sort of the everyday drinking wine of the Piedmont. Folks mostly drink Barbera because Nebbiolo is such a prestigious grape. It makes such expensive and long-lived wines that you can't drink Nebbiolo every day unless you have the budget to do it. But it is considered sort of the king of Piedmont grapes. As I said, it's the grape of Barolo and Barbaresco. And as you know, as Jeff said, those are some of the most prestigious wines, not only in Italy, but in the world. They can make wines that can age decades. And it's a grape that's known for being big and tannic and hard to tame when young. So the wine usually requires anywhere from 7 to 10 years before you even think about opening up your good Barolos and Barbarescos. But a good thing to know is that you can still drink the grape if you don't necessarily want to spend the money always on Barolo and Barbaresco. You could just buy a Nebbiolo d'Alba, or you'll sometimes see Langhe Nebbiolo.
Yep.
And these are things you can find usually at a much lower price than you're going to find Barolo and Barbaresco. Obviously, it's the same grape. It's just grown in different areas, and it doesn't have all of the requirements that Barolo and Barbaresco would have in terms of how long you have to age it and when you can release it. Usually on a Nebbiolo d'Alba and on a Langhe Nebbiolo, the requirements are the producers aren't forced to age their wine so long and adhere to such strict requirements. So Silvano's Nebbiolo d'Alba here spends about the same time as the Barbera in oak, 10 to 12 months usually every year. And again, it's sort of that combination of the Botti, the larger barrels, and the barriques.
Right.
For the same reason I mentioned with the Barbera Superior, he doesn't want the flavor of oak to dominate, so he's very careful in how he uses oak. But certainly, what you'd notice when you're drinking his Nebbiolo d'Alba, you could think of it as a sort of I don't know if he would characterize it this way, but a baby Barolo or a baby Barbaresco. It doesn't quite have the aging of Barolo, but as I mentioned, the story goes that Diano d'Alba being so close to the Barolo zone, they almost were part of the Barolo zone. So in a sense, this is sort of Barolo terroir in a way.
Right.
It's just not officially called Barolo. And I don't want to say it is Barolo because it's certainly not treated. It's not aged as long as Barolo's aged in terms of.
Well, I mean, it's not aged. It doesn't meet all the requirements. But the great thing about it is, most Barolos and Barbarescos aren't even openable.
Yeah.
For 5 to 10 years. Now there's the whole new world versus old world mentality, even within those regions, and debate going on is, do you make a wine that has to be aged for 20 years before you can open it, or do we make a wine that we can sell and open and buy in a consumer-driven society? And you have the new younger generation of Barolo and Barbaresco makers coming in, but with this, you don't have the guilt, right? So if you open it and it's not quite ready, you didn't spend $80 up. Really, that's the entry level to Barolos and Barbarescos is $80. You can have a Nebbiolo Diablo or a Nebbiolo from Langhe or another subregion, and it's gonna have the same flavor profile, but you don't have to wait until your kids are out of college before you drink it. We need to drink before our kids go to college, or when they're young, or when we're locked up in our house for many years. It just seems. Right. So anyway, so this is $32.99. I would say a great value. I mean, it outkicks its coverage even at that price point. The other thing I always say, when you pour that Nebbiolo in somebody's glass, it pours like Pinot Noir, but hits you like a cab, right? I mean, it doesn't taste like a cab, but it looks very light, and it has aromatics of kind of a Pinot Noir, very floral. Very amazing nose on it. Sometimes people say the hallmarkers, on your tasting notes, you say cherry and black tea. Black tea is kind of one of those hallmarkers. The other one that people always say is tar and roses. Now, tar sometimes isn't the best term to use. That's why people are saying black tea and roses. But then it is an amazing, it has a huge tannic profile, despite looking more like a Pinot Noir in the glass.
You'll see the color is very pale and almost has like an orange type of hue at the rim. It's hallmark Nebbiolo grape. And I often say it's sort of the iron fist in the velvet glove. Pour it, and as Jeff says, it kind of has that Pinot Noir look. You smell it, it's roses, and it smells really pretty. And then you drink it, and you realize how big the wine is. And this is the wine they would have with something like Ossobuco or something really, things with truffles on them, something really dense and meaty and with a lot of flavor. And that's what you're going to pair this with. That you got to
Puttanesca, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So with that, we are gonna, before my time runs out, we're gonna sign off here. Unless anybody has any questions real quick. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to be doing another one of these next week. We're going to be talking about our Premium Wine Club wines and our bubbly wines. So we have some amazing wines from Tuck Beckstoffer in our Premium Wine Club, and then we have some Piedmont sparkling wines from Slovenia in our bubbly wine club. So talking about those next week, I'm going to try to get Peter Gonk on from Slovenia. I've been going back and forth with him to see if we can manage the time change or time difference. But with that, I want to thank John for joining us. Coming up from John, we actually are working on both another Italian wine club wine in about 6 months from now, and then we just got done finalizing, and we're working out the numbers for another Spanish wine club wine. So he's been great with finding us some hidden gems of things that aren't available, but also have the amazing story behind them and are true to the geography and the story where they come from. So I want to thank him for joining us. We'll probably have him back on again, and then hopefully once quarantine is up, I get to hang out with him maybe in Spain or Italy or.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So perfect. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to hit hopefully I can stop recording. All right, thanks everybody. I'm going to stop recording here real quick.